Hey everybody, before we jump into the chapter 2 homework, I'm going to do an on-screen demo to sort of show how to work through some of the logic there. I wanted to encourage you to have this written out on notebook paper. I'm going to step off screen so you can get a full view of what's on the whiteboard. Have this as your notes, okay, some version of this. We went over this in class this week, so this should look fairly familiar. And just remember, we're going to be doing a 3-step process in chapter 2. The first step is we're going to remember our accounting formula. Okay, we first looked at this in chapter 1. The second step, we're going to be remembering the accounts that fall underneath the accounting formula. So for instance, cash will always be an asset. Accounts payable, note payable will always be liabilities. And in owner's equity, we will always have capital, revenue, drawings, and expense. By the way, over here for assets, I put kind of what we're most typically seeing: cash, accounts receivable, equipment, and supplies. That list will grow as we move further through the course. But for now, these are the kind of the main examples of assets. So just know the accounts will fall underneath each of these parts of the accounting formula, and that's just, again, one of the rules that we have in terms of where these accounts fall within the accounting formula. Step 3, remember our debit credit logic. That's what we really learned and kind of dove into this week. Remember that with assets we add on the debit side, and with we take away on the credit side. With liabilities, it's the opposite. We add on the credit side, we take away on the debit side, and then with owner's equity, it's a little bit different. What we do is we add on the capital and revenue. So the rule with equity is that we add on the credit side and we take away on the debit side. And we're going to do that adding and taking away, the crediting and debiting, with the 4 main accounts. So capital will always be a credit. Revenue will always be a credit. With capital and revenue, we're always adding to the owner's equity. Drawings and expense will always be debits because those we're always, those accounts take away from equity. So we're building here, okay? One building block builds on top of another. It's really key to understand this. The problems that we're going to go through in a moment, you must have this logic laid out. I would encourage you not to try and do this in your head. Have it out on a piece of paper. And then when we get to the homework, we're actually going to be doing step 4, which is read the fact and interpret the fact using these rules. So what I have here on the screen are the 6 facts related to problem number 5 from chapter 2 homework, okay? And what I want to do is encourage you to kind of approach this problem in a way where you're kind of relying on notes and doing the problem on paper and then entering it into the software, okay? And doing it on paper is just going to help you kind of, I think, make the step from the problem to the software. It's not required, but I want to encourage it just as a way for you to kind of build some of your accounting skills. So let's take a look at each of these problems. So the first problem is business owner invests $19,800 of cash into the business. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my red marker to kind of highlight some of the key things in each fact. All right. So first of all, I'm given that number and I'm given the word cash. So we should know that we're going to be up here in cash. Let's create a cash T account. All right. Now let's interpret. Business owner invests cash into the business. Well, this is, remember, we're accounting for the business. So if cash is going up, then we're going to debit cash. Now, I'm also have to read that the business owner is the one investing, meaning adding, okay? Adding. The business owner is adding. It's another way to think about investing here in this context, cash to the business. Well, that's capital, okay? I need to interpret that as being capital. So over here, I'm going to have $19,800 as a credit. Because remember, we don't ever debit capital. We only credit capital. So in the homework software, you're going to see that we're going to be adding to assets and adding to capital. And that means we're going to be debiting assets and crediting capital. Okay? And if you notice, our accounting equation balance is $19,800 equals $19,800. All right. Hires an administrative assistant on October 2nd. Where's the number here? The answer is we don't have a number, and therefore there is no transaction to account for here. Okay, we need a number. But that goes back to some of the chapter 1, identifying an actual transaction that we must account for. We don't have it here, so this would be, the homework software requires you to just input no entry, okay? And it requires you to do that, and I'll show that in the demo in a moment. Number 3, purchases equipment on account for $2,508. One note here, you have the word furniture in the homework software. In the actual business fact, but it's supposed to be equipment because that's what the That's what you're going to be forced to input down below. It's a bug within the homework software. All right, well, equipment. If you remember back to your notes, equipment is also an asset. So let's put up here a little T account for equipment. It's going to follow the same logic as up here. Well, how do we add equipment to our business? Well, we debit it, right? So we're going to put $2,508 over here. So we've got $2,508 of an asset. Now let's look at the other account. Remember, we always have two accounts with each of these transactions. Well, if you notice, this word on account is an indicator that we're dealing with either a payable or a receivable. So we need to think, does this business owner owe someone, or does this business owner have a right to receive? Well, James, the proprietor in this problem, is getting the equipment, and he's going to owe someone $2,508. So we have an account payable here. That's what the answer would be here, $2,508. I know to credit it because I add to an account payable by crediting it, right? So as you notice, we are reading the fact, and then we're pulling out the key language, okay, either equipment, on account. We're thinking further. We're analyzing it further, thinking through, okay, if it's on account and this business owner owes someone, it's a liability. Well, how do we add to a liability? We credit it. And then we also have to identify the right account title. And in this case, it would be account payable. October 6th, sells a house, bills the client $4,752 for services performed. Okay. Your homework problem actually says for realty services performed. That just means services of selling real estate. Okay, realty is land and buildings. Okay, so they're throwing a little bit of nuance in there, and it's really just forcing you to really closely look at the question. And if you ever come across a word that you don't understand, like realty, if that's foreign to you, look it up. Okay, you should understand every word you're looking at here. Okay, and you can also always ask me. So for services performed, this is another key indicators. It's a term that tells us that we're dealing with revenue. Okay, this business owner is earning revenue when they perform a service. That's the rule of revenue. Okay, so if they're earning $4,752 of revenue, okay, then that means that we're increasing revenue, and of course the rule is right here for us. We're gonna credit $4,752. Okay, now let's look at the other side of the transaction. Sells a house, bills the client $4,007. Okay, so we obviously identified the amount. The question here is the business owner, is James in this case, getting cash or setting up an account receivable? Well, in this instance, we don't see on account anywhere, so we can assume, we can read this and interpret it to mean that he's getting cash. So again, we got $4,752 in cash, okay? Because we add to cash by debiting it. And in this case, his cash is going up because he's getting paid for the service. Okay, pays $1,452 on the balance related to the October 3rd transaction. So we're looking back to the October 3rd transaction. All right, so pays $1,452. We can interpret this. He's paying out cash. Okay, that's how we would interpret that. We've seen this before. Just know that that's what that means. We don't see on account here, but we're being referred back to this transaction here where we got access to the equipment and then set up an account payable. Now the business owner is actually paying part of that off. So if he's paying for it with cash, and that's what we're interpreting this to be, cash will be credited by $1,452 because we show cash going down when we pay something, right, by crediting it. Now we need to think about the October 3rd transaction. Well, he's paying this part of this off, which means our liability is going down as well by $1,452. Okay? If you need to pause the video and kind of just take it, just be taking notes on your end, pause the video and then think about sort of what's happening here. Okay? If you need to do that, feel free. I'm going through this rather quickly. Okay. Pays the admin assistant a $3,300 salary. All right. We don't see on account here, so he's not paying on account. This isn't an IOU. It's not a liability that's being set up. Once again, we're seeing this word pays, and then we're given this amount. So the idea is that it's cash being used. So again, we're going to have cash going out. Pays the admin assistant. Okay, this is an expense. Well, we pay workers. That's an expense to our company. That's and we're going to see the salaries and wages expenses, and we're going to have an account title in the this problem called salaries and wages expense. Okay, and remember, we only ever debit expense. We don't ever credit expense. So we're going to have here 3,300. Sorry, that's a little scrunched up in there. Just to encourage you, like, do these notes on your end in a manner that makes sense and that's helpful. So this is the upfront work that's required before you should kind of, it's work that I would suggest that you go through to think about the inputs that you'll need for homework question number 5 in chapter 2. You don't have to do this. You can go straight into the software, and if you want to think through the logic and kind of look at your notes and refer to your notes and then think through, but this might be a helpful step. These T accounts, we'll be looking at them more next week, but the T accounts are really a very good, helpful tool that will help us kind of interpret and kind of work with all these numbers and keep them kind of locked into a good frame of reference. Because what we're going to be looking ahead at in chapter 2 is we need to take transactions like this and then start to summarize them to get them ready for the end of period balance, financial statements, balance sheet, income statement, statement of equity, and then cash flows. That's also part of chapter 2, but we're going to get to that next week. Okay? I hope this was helpful, and I'll also have a bit of a demo on the actual homework software. Thanks.
Take the facts that we just walked through on the whiteboard and transfer it into the homework software. Okay, so again, we're going to go through these transactions. I'm not going to go through all 6 of these. I'm going to do the first 2 just to kind of illustrate, how to think about the accounting equation, the debit credit logic, with context of what they're asking for in the software. It's really just to kind of help you get jump started in the actual homework problem. But remember, the logic we just walked through. Okay, most of the work is now done. Now we're inputting. So James Vaughn begins the real business as a real estate agent with cash investment of $19,800. So this is on October 1st. This is that transaction where he's investing in his business. And we saw that we increased cash. And cash, as we saw, is an asset. And it's a $19,800 addition. We also saw that he's increasing his owner's equity. Okay? And where is that? So part of this is kind of just finding in the drop-down box what part of the accounting equation, and then also within the accounting equation, what we're debiting and crediting. If you start to write in capital here, you'll see owner's capital sort of starts to pull up, and you can see that. And then we're just inputting the amounts. So as you can see, if I have what I did on the whiteboard as my notes next to me in those T accounts, you should be able to come back here, and it's kind of a reinforcing exercise. What is very important is that you think about the effect on the accounting equation, okay, assets, liabilities, and equity, and then the debit credit logic. Now, the debit credit logic is, that left, right, debit is left, credit is right. The T account is really, it's a visual illustration of the account and then the debit credit movement. Okay, and we're going to walk through more of this next week in class. I make 2 other kind of notes here. October 2nd, hires an administrative assistant. We made note of the fact that there's no effect, or actually I said no entry on the whiteboard, but the idea is that there would be no effect here. And that's because we don't have a number. There was no actual accounting transaction. So that's how we would fill out for October 2nd. And then finally, the final note here is, I mentioned in the whiteboard video again, but just to make a note, furniture is what the homework software states up here. However, if you scroll down, you'll see the list of accounts, which, by the way, you can expand and open up. There's no furniture account listed here. That's a bug within the software. It should be equipment up at the top. And that's, this is where we saw, again, we increase assets, and it's going to be equipment, not furniture. So just wanted to note that. I didn't want that to be a point of confusion. And that, of course, was $2,508. And in that amount, transaction, we also increased liabilities, and that was accounts payable. So this is how we would fill this out. Again, once you go through the logic on the whiteboard, this should be a fairly kind of straightforward exercise. So most of the work is in that analytical piece. So I just want to encourage you to sit with it, take your time, make sure you have your notes written out, and this will help you learn. Okay? And we'll push this forward into next week.